Oh, hey, it's Dr. Darnise. Listen, y'all caught me reading as I tend to do, and we'll be talking today about why ideas are under attack. Today I'm talking about Julius Bailey's book, Racial Realities and the Post-Racial Dreams. Okay, that's what I'm reading. But, before I even get to that, you know, America's in shambles, and our relations are in the toilet once again, even after the idea that we are now in a post-racial America after the election of Barack Obama. Well, Julius Bailey here really takes that to task, and he helps us understand, if we didn't already, why we are not in a post-racial America. And he helps us understand why it is that some Americans have a very difficult time understanding how much racism still plays a part of our nation's issues. So that's why they can be with, get rid of DEI, which they think is some kind of preferential treatment. They want to get rid of what they perceive as liberal university agenda. These words have become flashpoints for them. Diversity, equity, gender, like all of these words have been something they just don't want to think about. And any of the violent kind of incidents that happen are perceived by them to be isolated incidents. But we know they're interconnected because of the thing called systemic racism, white supremacy, basically. So Julius Bailey offers us a powerful way. I thought we would do a little study with him today because it's really interesting. It's really interesting how he helps us see why is it that certain Americans, generally white Americans, have a difficult time understanding that whiteness is a problem, or that white supremacy still exists, that racism is still present and active in America. It's very hard for them. Okay, so in this particular book, and I use this in my courses, y'all, I do African American religion, African American history, I do a whole lot of courses, right? And I use Racial Realities and Post-Racial Dreams, the Age of Obama and Beyond, to help students, help us kind of get on the same page. Because some people will say, well, yeah, I don't know, I never have experienced that racism is systemic. I never really understood what white supremacy is as a systemic issue. So in this book, Bailey takes us through, well, first of all, the first chapter is called, I'll tell you a lot. The first chapter is called, I Can't Breathe, So What, F Your Breath. I can't breathe, which, where this comes from, right? From George Floyd's unaliving on television. I can't breathe, so what, F your breath. And Bailey doesn't just deal with, well, really, he's not talking about George Floyd at all, because this book came out in 2016. He is talking about Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Freddie Gray, and the ongoing onslaught against black people before the police. Okay, so why? What is the reasoning that he gives for this? And it's really interesting. He tells us about something called the conservative framing. It's the why. People always want to know, why do they think this way? Why do white people think this way? Why can't they see the systemic nature of these things? These deaths are not individual isolated incidents. Why don't they see the interconnectedness of things? Well, Julius Bailey has a term for it, and it's called a conservative framing. It's a way people interpret history and identity and social change. It's a certain framework that he has named the conservative framing. Like, picture the frame around a picture. Within the frame of the picture, what's going on within that frame? What's going on in that picture? Julius Bailey says the conservative framing around the picture of what's going on, let's just say the unaliving of a black person in front of the police, the conservative framing says it must be that person's fault because the police are here to protect and serve. They don't have a memory of the police being an extension of slave catchers back in the day, right? They don't have that understanding of the police being an extension of an overseer. They don't have that. In their understanding, the conservative framing that Julius Bailey is talking about is, why can't you all, you black people, just do what the police ask you to do? If you do that, then you'll be free to go. Because the police don't have it out for you and they're just doing their jobs. Okay, so I want to explain to you more about what this conservative framing is and why I use Julius Bailey, because he so accurately names this. You might not on the other side agree, but you'll say, oh, I guess that makes sense, right? So I'm going to just jump into reading a little bit of this paragraph. This is again in chapter 1, if you want to get the book, or go to the library and get the book. Chapter 1. It's just a little bit of the paragraph. A good place to start would be the fact that race means different things to different people in different contexts. Rather than a racial monolith, there are competing frames or systems for understanding and presenting the problems suffered by African Americans. The conservative framing of the race issue imagines that American democracy, business, and social life are at least in essence equal, that the playing field is a level one for all participants. That is the conservative worldview and understanding about how life in America works. It is essentially equal, a level playing field for all participants. Here comes. Anything outside of that frame, anything outside of their understanding, be it police violence, income inequality, or social marginalization, is explained with reference to the frame as criminality, laziness, a culture that is incompatible with the mainstream. There's your answer, right there. Why is it that a lot of white people really can't see the systemic nature of how non-white people are treated in this country? Why can't they see that? Why can't they see that all of these deaths that continue to happen at the hands of the police, why don't they see the systemic nature of that? I'm going to read it to you again. Their frame is that everybody is equal under the law. There's a level playing field. Their conservative worldview makes them see the world that way. So when something happens that might challenge that frame, in their mind they say, oh, that's because, though, you didn't follow the directions or the rules because of criminality, laziness, and or a culture that is incompatible with the mainstream. Meaning you people are so different from us over here in the mainstream that it is your own fault. You're not like us. You're not like us. So you should, as black people, be more like us. You should assimilate. You should act right. You should act the way that we act. And then you will fit in with our mainstream life, and these things won't happen to you. Okay. The frames themselves are morally neutral. In practice, however, they have the power to produce detrimental and racist effects. Racially insensitive conservatives frame the African American experience in a way that denies their lived experiences, burdening those who experience racism daily with the responsibility for its continuation. So basically blaming the victim. So the conservative framing means I can't quite come to grips with the fact that it's anything other than your own fault. It's never been in my experience that the police are here to terrorize me, so I can't understand you saying that the police are here to terrorize you. It must be really because you're lazy, you're a criminal, you're doing something outside of the frame, and that's why this is happening to you. So Julius Bailey is really helping us put words with things that we experience regularly, that we observe regularly. But the question remains for a lot of us, but how do they not see this? It breaks their frame. They don't want to have their frame broken. You could also call it cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is when you tell me something that so radically upsets the way I already think that I can't take that. It breaks my brain. Don't tell me anything other than what I already know or believe. Cognitive dissonance says, I'm going to tell you something that goes against what you already think. So here's what's going on in America, and here you have this group of people, black people, Latino people, whatever, gay people are saying, hey, this continues to happen to me in my group. This continues on a regular basis to happen to me. So it has to be systemic. This has been going on for centuries, actually. Don't you see how it's systemic? Well, that breaks their brain. It breaks their brain. They're like, no, it can't be that. You must be wrong because I can't be wrong. Everybody likes me. Everybody who is like me agrees. You must be wrong. And you know what? You're incompatible with our mainstream culture anyway, so it really is your problem. You should really fix that. Maybe you should assimilate. Maybe you should stop calling yourself an African American or Black American and just say you're American. So Julius Bailey gives us this understanding. Oh, they're working with this idea that everything is equal, that there's a level playing field. They really are working with that. And so my own behavior is always going to be the problem, no matter what. And right now, we're looking at this situation with Nolan Wells, the young black man who went out with his white friends, and they came back alive, and he came back not alive, right? And so black people are questioning what happened. Black people are like, well, tell us what happened. And the white young people who were there with him and their parents are like, well, it was just an accident. We don't really know what happened, but nothing bad happened. Nothing suspicious happened. Well, black people are like, no, we've seen this kind of thing before, and we know something suspicious happened. Why are you not telling us all of the details? Julius Bailey gives us language because there's so much cognitive dissonance for them to have to realize that those white friends that he went out with have more information. They can't see like, oh, it must be their fault somehow. But we all know if a situation was reversed and it was a one white person who didn't come back from that group of black people, we would know they'd see that very clearly. They'd see very clearly that there's a suspicious element. Okay, so again, Julius Bailey says, this frame acknowledges that America had a problem with race in the past. So they won't say, oh, racism has never existed, right? They won't say that. So they acknowledge that America has had a problem with race in the past, but improvements since then have made its continued discussion an exercise in futility. Why do you all keep bringing this up? Why do you keep bringing up racism? It must mean you're racist, right? They will tell us for calling out, they will say to us, calling out racism is racist. You see the cognitive dissonance that they can't cope with. You see how they can't let go of the frame they already have. Rather than acknowledge that there's racism that exists in their conservative framing, no, it doesn't exist anymore. So in order to keep that thought, they have to say, okay, well then you're the racist. I'm the racist because I mentioned it? Yeah. Wow. So if there's a house on fire, if I talk about the house being on fire and maybe you should get out of that house that's on fire, I have to automatically be the arsonist? So yeah. All right, to continue. With a black man in the Oval Office, race is posited as a ready-at-hand excuse for what actually boils down to lazy fatalism, meaning you always just default to racism. But look, there's a black man who got elected to the presidency, so you can't just blame it on racism. You can't just keep saying that America is racist because look, we have a black man elected to office, the presidency. And so it's summed up nicely for them. You can't just keep saying that because we have a black man elected to the presidency. And so those of us who are not white, are scratching our heads like, how do you not see that did not really change things fundamentally? Well, here we are. So this book came out in 2016, and yes, we know who got elected 2016 for the first time, but this was pre-COVID and pre-second term of this particular president. So there's a lot of things that are not even dealt with here that we have seen and continue to see almost on a daily basis now. But if you keep in mind, oh, the reason that they keep ignoring, or they can so consistently put their heads in the sand about racism, is because there's an underlying belief that they are trying to keep in place. They're trying to keep the idea that that there's a level playing field, and that American democracy, business, and social life are at least in essence equal, to quote him again. To tell them anything else makes their head just go pop. The cognitive dissonance is too much. And they would have to deal with a lot of things that they don't want to about the nature of American history, as we see, because they would really rather just literally whitewash parts of American history that make them uncomfortable. And they will even talk about comfort. They'll say, well, you're making my kids feel uncomfortable in school. Never mind the fact that Black kids have been uncomfortable in school forever. They don't see that, only that their kids are uncomfortable now because now they're made to feel responsible for slavery or racism. And we're like, that's not even what we're getting at. We're not trying to say that. We're trying to talk about history as it actually happened. So anyway, Julius Bailey gives us this idea that there's a conservative framing, and that I think is a helpful way of at least reckoning with what comes out of their mouths. No, you're not allowed to talk about racism because that makes you racist. No, you can't make me believe that the police are unfairly targeting you, because really their job is to preserve and protect. You must be at fault somehow. And that's the kind of lived reality that we see, right? That it must be our fault somehow. So I'm offering you this lesson here just to, help you see that there's a lot of different ways in which we can employ the Black intellectual tradition to help us understand what's going on at any given point. So here on this channel, my House of Humanities, we study history, we study literature, we study religion, we study the things that affect Black people, we study things that have strengthened and empowered us as Black people to deal with the realities in which we actually live, to deal with the actual racial realities that Julius Bailey notes. So I'm going to wrap it up there, but I just want to remind you, if you're interested in Black intellectual traditions, literature, religion, history, and the ideas to help us understand today's world, then you are in the right place. That's what I do over here. So I hope that you will come back for more. If you are not already subscribed, subscribe. And welcome to the House of Humanities.